Actually, this is a continuation of the stream of my conversation with Dalmatian Dog on Vincent's stream. And we were talking about marriage and why the birth rate is in decline in Korea as well as Japan. And I was saying the reason for this is the tolerance of fornication, which is the sacred cow of the West. I was explaining to him that if you tolerate extramarital sex, then there will be a lot of it. People, when they have sex, do not think about settling down with their sex partner for the rest of their lives and bringing up children together. And if they're not, so if you expect people to marry, which is for a man the most expensive form of sex, you are in fact discouraging marriage by giving men all kinds of marriage substitutes, such as it's okay to be gay, it's okay to have sex before marriage, it's okay to be transgender, because that would have the effect of dampening the desire to marry and lowering the status of married parents. And if you lower their status, then fewer people will do it, because obviously it's easier just to be gay and having sterile sex and not having to pay for the children and not worrying about them. And in this way, you are discouraging marriage, whether you intend to or not. Now, I don't know if anybody else has said it. I mean, I obviously read it somewhere, and I remember it, and now it seems we're not allowed to discuss this because of increasing censorship by the matriarchy. Now, matriarchy is a word that I like to use because it contains a lot of ideas. It contains the idea of a society that prioritizes the preferences of married parents. Matriarchy is a society that prioritizes the preferences of unmarried parents who casually conceived and parented their illegitimate children, while a patriarchy is a society that prioritizes the preferences of married parents who want to properly parent their legitimate offspring. And so, one group is doing things in a way that is the direct opposite of the other. And we may have political views. Well, we will have political views of which is better and which is worse. So I'm saying that it is obvious, just my defining things in this way, that patriarchy will be more effective and rational than matriarchy, because you are actually privileging married parents, and married parents would, being encouraged by being privileged, want to if people see that married parents are privileged, then they would want to enjoy the privileges of married parents, and that's why they want to become married too. And that's why married parents want to encourage their own children to marry before having children, and obviously parental pride would mean that parents would want their children to be considered marriageable. Imagine if you had 10 children and nobody wanted to marry any of your children. That would be, well, a defeat and a disgrace for your parenting skills and maybe, the quality of your children. So this is basically this is the incentive scheme for patriarchy. You privilege married parents, and this means non-parents are lower in status to to married parents, and unmarried parents would be treated as sex offenders. So, and this would send a clear message to everyone in society about what is the right thing to do. No sex education classes required. Hello, Elliot. Yes, Dalmatian Dog and I were having quite an interesting conversation after the Vincent Bruno stream ended. It's a shame it wasn't recorded, but he asked a few good questions about the declining birth rate of North Korea, Japan, and the West. And it is, it's obviously not just a Western problem. I would say it's a problem of tolerating fornication. And the only way to reverse the situation is to, in fact, criminalize fornication. Obviously, we don't want the bedroom police, and so I'm going to say unmarried parents will be treated as sex offenders. So that gives you a lot of wiggle room to, well, have sex discreetly and get away with it as long as you don't become a married parent. Sorry, as long as you don't become an unmarried parent. And this would work very easily just by passing a law. This Dalmatian dog was saying was too radical, and he was basically saying Americans wouldn't stand for it. But actually, not that long ago, there were American bastardy laws, and there's a Wikipedia entry about being born out of wedlock in early colonial America. They were treated as sex offenders. Colonial American bastardy laws. And this included corporal punishment of the woman, of the unmarried mother. So I don't think Americans saying, ooh, this is un-American. No, it's not un-American. It actually happened in colonial America. Unless Americans want to say, to have is un-American, this is some sort of, it's what 21st century Americans want. I don't think those the rest of the West. Follows America is standards of sexual morality, and so if the problem is degeneracy, and I mean by degeneracy tolerance of widespread bastardy, then it can be reversed by treating unmarried parents as sex offenders. And this, the Quran does in chapter 24, verse 2, which prescribes a a punishment of 100 lashes. So I see Elliot ask, where's Dalmatian dog? He actually said to me that he had to go. So he went. But we were having a very interesting conversation in Vincent's stream. Did you listen to part of it, Elliot? So it would be a shame if, I continued to be ignored, because all my remedies are doable, and it could be done at the flick of a switch by somebody in mainstream media deciding to platform me and talk about secular Quranism in a way that will be engaging to the viewing public. It is possible that there are no honourable and influential people anymore in the West, which would be conclusive evidence of its moral degeneracy, which means that it cannot be saved, and it will continue to rot with men who think they have become women, or possibly even children, watching on the sidelines and not doing anything because they are unaware of the role of being men, which is to defend territory, defend principles. But how can they defend principles if they have none? And principles come from moral principles, and moral principles come from religious principles, and you can't have religious principles if you don't have a religion, and Americans don't have an official religion, which is why their legislature has gone crazy. It's corrupt and incompetent ruling classes making up any law that they want. And they are helpless to say, hey, that's wrong, because they have no moral system and therefore no yardstick with which to decide for themselves whether, or even agree amongst themselves, like, well, this is obviously wrong. I know that there's been some attempt to incorporate the no-hide laws into, well, I can't even say into US law, because it's not really in US law, because it's nowhere stated. So, well, Education and Sharing Day is merely a proclamation by a series of American presidents. It has no force of law. And originally, when Carter established Education and Sharing Day, they were all listed. And then, for some reason, all the no-hide laws were discreetly removed until they're not listed. There was actually, on Education and Sharing Day this year, which was the 2nd of April, a proclamation by Biden, and it doesn't even mention the no-hide laws. And this was something that Vincent Bruno mentioned in a post on his Facebook timeline. And this is how diluted principles have become. So it's all for show. They don't really mean it, and they don't want to. They actually take away the laws, so that nobody can read them, or they can't easily read them, in order to dissociate themselves from the moral imperative of adhering to the minimum moral standard that God, if he exists, has decreed for humanity. So the Americans want it both ways. They want, on the one hand, to be considered a righteous Gentile nation, while on the other hand, not mentioning the no-hide laws, deliberately not even listing them, so that people won't even know what they are, or question them, or ask what on earth it all means. And that is because they cannot resolve the the conflict between the no-hide laws and the First Amendment. I'm saying that the First Amendment is based on Chapter 2, verse 256 of the Quran, which states that there is no compulsion in belief. Truth stands clear from error. That is what it says. The Quran is the only holy book that is said to be the directly revealed word of God. And there are only two. There was the Torah and there is the Quran, both containing God's laws for Jews and Gentiles. So this is something Americans, ordinary Americans, can talk about, but perhaps they're too morally apathetic to do so. Perhaps they're not frightened enough, or perhaps they're too neurotic, particularly the middle classes. One of the things that I've noticed recently is observing the middle class people who go on the channel called Randos United or Faturecci is the displays of character defects and mental illnesses, which are in a way fascinating if you are an amateur psychologist such as myself. But as you can see, America and the rest of the West is being slowly rotted inside by the unprincipled people who only pretend to believe when they don't. The worst of which is, well, a very bad example is an example that I've given you, the Biden proclamation about education and sharing day without actually even listing the no-hide laws or even mentioning the no-hide laws. And people like Luke Ford, who are really completely unprincipled. We know that he comes from a Seventh-day Adventist background. We know that his father was Desmond Ford, the Seventh-day Adventist theologian, and there was some controversy about which line he supported, but it doesn't matter because it's all stuff and nonsense anyway. And Luke rebelled by converting to Orthodox Judaism. I only recently discovered that Desmond Ford was married 3 times. So if you have 3 failed marriages or 2 failed marriages, then obviously you must have failed somewhere. And perhaps that explains how Luke has turned out to be an unprincipled nihilist with no principles, who cannot be expected to say the same thing twice, to assert the same principle twice, to ever believe in anything controversial. Well, no, that's not right. He likes to talk about controversial things because it attracts viewers, and obviously when it goes wrong for him, when people criticize him, he will disavow what he said in order to keep his channel. And in fact, I would say that Western men are like Luke Ford, the educated ones, the good-looking ones. They are atheists and nihilists like Luke Ford, and this means that you, Western man, will not be able to get his act together to challenge and defeat the matriarchy. But he attracts a lot of people like Eliot, who I don't think he believes in anything much either. Nihilists would attract other nihilists. Birds of a feather flock together. So yeah, have a look at Luke Ford. Look at his face, his Hollywood teeth, his even features. But he believes in nothing. So while you think, oh, he's a passably attractive man for his age, you have to imagine that behind that mask is maggots and snakes squirming around in the mind of an atheist and a nihilist, because he doesn't believe in God, he doesn't believe in Judaism, he only converted to Judaism in order to assert a higher status than his subscribers and viewers, whom he likes to piss on. He likes to get them going by talking about the subjects that he knows that they love to hear, about vaccines, about whether the election was stolen, and then piss in their faces, and they keep coming back for it and pay him. And this is the astonishing feature of the degradation of Western man, that they have no standards, they only seek consolation in each other because they have no other people that they can talk to in real life. But I must end the stream because I have another one coming up with John Vance on the subject of whether the Constitution is enough. Let me have the proper title. It was John's suggestion. Can the Constitution be a substitute for religion? That was his. That's the title. So talk to you very soon. Elliot asks, why don't I like Colin Liddell? He's such a shit stirrer, isn't he? I don't like Colin because he has no principles and because he is the most charmless internet personality I have ever come across. Now here's something about Luke that I really want to say. He loves to assemble a bunch of retards so he can piss on them. The most unprincipled, the most dejected, the most charmless, he will platform in order to show his superiority over them. And when they're any good, I guess he will dump them. So I don't know what Colin Liddell stands for. We know he's a neocon, presumably because he thinks there's some money in it or something. I just have to have one foot in the establishment camp, and that is foreign policy, because lots of stupid people who don't understand foreign policy are probably prepared to go with the government, the anti-Russia rhetoric and narrative, and I won't be proven wrong just yet because not everybody's interested in foreign policy. So I think that's why the people who identify with the dissident right want to support the war in Ukraine. So that's why I don't think much of Colin Liddell, who is another Luke Ford, but obviously an uglier, more charmless version of it, of atheism and nihilism. So thank you for your attention. I will be speaking to you shortly.